this computer. I still don't see that it's recording, but my light is on, so that's always a good time. Yeah, it is recording. Remember,
Sorry, Professor,
Ye-
but we democratically chose to be striking today and tomorrow. So I don't understand. Are we going to be penalized?
record again. So there we go. So hopefully that'll be the extent of disturbances for today. So I want us to think about New York and what we understand in response to New York and the advent of Broadway. That
Complicit in genocide. Complicit in genocide.
How is Broadway different from other stages as it rivaled the West End and it became a very particular space that was in many ways elite, and set the bar for how we still understand success, unfortunately. And then that can allow us to think about some of the problems with understanding success, which would fall outside of the course. But hopefully as artists, you'll be able to make a living through venues that you deem acceptable, whether it be Broadway or Fringe, whatever you like best. What's also important to notice is that during this very little period of time, so roughly between the end of World War II and Joseph McCarthy's reign of terror over American society, where there were communist and queer and feminist witch hunts taking place everywhere. This was an incredibly progressive time where really complicated subject matter started to move forward onto the American stage. The genre that we look at when we think of Americanism of this period of time would be American realism. Tennessee Williams was part of a group of writers who came up working in realism, and in particular, symbolic realism. In other words, ways to read a realistic storyline with symbolic moments that allow us to think about the deeper underpinnings of what might be happening in a given text. Williams is also understood as a kind of modern Shakespeare, where many characters of the Shakespearean era have in many ways been brought down with a very localized kind of setting. All of Williams's plays do this, the more successful ones like The Glass Menagerie and Streetcar Named Desire and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof have a very, very small microcosm of what we're looking at. What's important for us to understand is that New Orleans stood as very, very different from the American world as a whole. If you look at the map of the United States from Gaspésie, from like all the way, right, really far from us and up north, all the way down through the Mississippi was New France. These areas of the United States were particularly French. New Orleans was sold to the Spanish, sold back to the French, and then purchased for, I always botch the amount. I think it's either 1.5 or 15 million, but I could be wrong. I can Google it, in the Louisiana Purchase. And New Orleans was bought by the United States. France had to give up New France because of the revolution. It could not support itself the way it did. How is New Orleans different? We've got a whole bunch of important factors contributing to the difference that made up New Orleans as an urban hub. One, the most important thing to understand is New Orleans started to have a very developed working class far before post-World War I. And this working class was made up of diverse groups of people, which included Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, Afro-Americans, and before this period of time, before the emancipation of slavery, what was understood as free people of color. All of these marginalized groups had a lot more freedom in different parts of New Orleans. If you go onto a map of New Orleans and you look at the French Quarter and the areas to the north and to the east, Treme is the oldest African-American area. I was going to say suburb, but it's not a suburb, it's in the city. And we have thriving languages and thriving cultures, of which Streetcar reflects with its diversity of characters. Its characters are important, and its characters reflect the diversity and social problems that existed during this period of time. Part of Williams's realism is an expose of the parts of American society that had changed after World War II, right? We're right in that period right after it, but also parts of the American fabric that needed change. And this would make reference to linguistic and socioeconomic and racialized divisions within society as well. When we deal with American literature, right, that's the nervous laugh, American literature has a very difficult language within it itself. Many African-American writers, if not all of them, drop language that makes a lot of us uncomfortable, as it is their lived experience. It's not our positions to judge. When I teach, and I teach American literature, I modernize language. Problematic, aggressive language isn't part of this text, but antiquated language in reform to race is. Whenever I see a word I'm not comfortable with and I'm looking at African Americanism, for example, I simply replace it with Black. If you go on to read James Baldwin or Zora Neale Hurston, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, very, very famous African American writers, they drop the N-bomb like there's no tomorrow. So I think as Canadians, we're not really used to that. So if you see language that doesn't make you super comfortable in your given corpus of American literature, one, I don't use words that offend people. So as I said, I would replace them, but also we don't need to address areas that place us in positions that compromise our own socioethics. What Streetcar Named Desire does is it brings to life the French Quarter of New Orleans after World War II. Between roughly the Jazz Age, so I'd say even ragtime before that, so roughly the 1890s, the French Quarter of New Orleans had a thriving music culture. This music culture is still alive today. This music culture still exists, and Williams does bring it to life very often through the symbolic realism of the play. You'll notice that music is used twofold. The blue piano is frequently played by piano players who are described to be not white, so we presume they would be African American. That kind of talent that was coming out of New Orleans during this period of time and would become part of the Jazz Age, and is part of the Jazz Age of this play, is there. And the blue piano in particular speaks to the mood within the play. There is supposed to be a mood of melancholy and sadness that would have existed during this period of time. The sadness exists principally for the very complicated main character of Blanche Dubois, and her characterization is Williams's gift. Williams's women are amazing. From Laura and her mother in Glass Menagerie to Maggie on a cat on a hot tin roof to Blanche in Streetcar Named Desire. I've included a screening of Streetcar for you, which you could have watched post reading it, no problem. And these women function as the voice of modernism. As we looked at over the past couple of weeks, we realized that many writers, especially in dramatic texts, but novels as well, use female characters as voices for social change. I've got screenings for you on which I urge you to do, and I'll give you roughly the second half of class or a portion of that to make sure you screen these. Broadway in the mid-20th century, the life of Tennessee Williams, and as well some information on the French Quarter after World War II. Blanche herself remains so complicated because she is in many ways a modern Hamlet. She's flawed, she's complicated, she's She has a deep-seated sadness, and she's trying to carve a place for herself in the world. This play, whenever it's put on, is put on rather successfully, and any actor would jump at the opportunity to have a chance to interpret a complicated character like Blanche and to move her forward in some kind of way on the stage. Williams uses, so for my scenography students, which I think the aggressiveness of the students who bomb the class, it's called Zoom bombing, by the way, had a number of people leave. But if you're scenography students, you might be thinking of the way that the play really exists within a very limited place. The surreal reality of the apartment on Elysian Fields, so in the French Quarter and further east and up from French Market, in what's understood as the Faubourg Marigny and what would become Bywater in response to these areas. This is where we have this apartment, which really has all of one bedroom. It's not a whole lot of big space. The courtyard that opens up to it to push it off back off the street is there, where we can constantly hear the music playing. Music works in twofold. We have the socio-historically correct music of the time. This time is the Jazz Age, but Blanche is also a character. So what Williams does do is he raises awareness to what we've really only started to talk about over the last 10 years, maybe, tops 12. Wellness issues, and Blanche suffers a lot. Her trauma is unraveled through her actions, through dramatic actions and dramatic irony. And then in scene 9 of the play, which works as one of the climaxes, where she is able to place forward her trauma for the audience to hear, so we realize how much she suffers, and that she suffers from a place out of her control, the same way that we understand, I would think, wellness issues today. We carry, I'm hoping, empathy when someone suffers, and we help them feel better about who they are through treatments and therapies to help them process. Blanche has none of these at all. Where does this come from? Where does Williams's strong focal point on psychological wellness come from? Williams's sister Rose was a victim of the psychology of the time. She suffered rather acutely from, I guess, what would be understood in response to being bipolar today. And her mother opted for one of the treatments of the time, a frontal lobotomy. As we all know, going near the human brain will result in disaster. And Rose was institutionalized for the rest of her life. If you look at photos of Williams, you'll constantly see him at events with someone who doesn't look 100% well, even though they're presented appropriately for the venue. And he took his sister Rose with him as frequently as possible to these events. He tried to give her life some kind of normalcy. In response to his own work, he also made sure that his women characters, Laura in Glass Menagerie and Blanche in Streetcar, echoed some of Rose's psychological and or emotional obstacles. And in many ways, he gives his fictional characters, he does this again in Suddenly Last Summer as well, he gives his fictional female characters their opportunity to give life to his sister, who suffered greatly. Comments or questions so far? I've disbanded the chat, so we were attacked a little bit. So if anyone has questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself. If you can't unmute yourself, just put up your hand and I can do that for you. Do we have any questions, or are we all thoroughly traumatized, and will this be a somewhat flat class? You're not being judged for it, trust me. Right, I had to call one of my administrators for some kind of help. So how do we stage shake streetcar? A streetcar intersects women, social issues, feminist, even queer subtext, done through camp and actual queer subtext, through this very sort of intricate form of characterization, of which makes Williams the most famous 20th century playwright. The play itself has been directed and produced in a series of different ways. I think the last big production was Kate Blanchett on Broadway with someone Edgerton, and they played the characters. I think Streetcar has gone back to Broadway, but Broadway has shorter stints, so it's not really holding the plays the same way because of the post-COVID market. Normally for a streetcar, I would ask for readings. I don't think anyone in this class is going to feel comfortable enough after the opening of class to read. I know I'm not, but if somebody does want to read, I can certainly do that. Otherwise, I can go through certain scenes to open this up. I want you to think about staging and social insubordination. I want you to think about the characters within this play as misfits in some ways. Stanley and Stella's marriage, which functions as the title of the play, is in itself awkward at best. You have two people from very different worlds representing the new class that would come into effect because of the destruction of the old South and the new South. You had people coming together. The impetus is really positive, but as you all know through either reading or screening Streetcar, is that the marriage itself is quite volatile, and Stanley's character remains as complicated as Blanche's, where Stella's functions as a grounding force between these two characters. Part of Stella's marriage is a motif of domestic abuse, which runs through the play with a harrowing third scene. The play itself is set up on 11 scenes, opposed to the more classically divided acts. You can get editions of this play which do divide it as per acts. These are liberty with the original text. I teach as per the 11 scenes within this play. I think Williams does an exceptionally organized job on holding together the focal points of this play with 11 very tangible scenes of which we can work through. Does anybody have comments or questions for me? I know you're all probably a little traumatized. Morgan, yes, please.
I just wanted to pop in and just say if you needed anyone to read for you, I'd be happy to do that. I know the class is a little quiet, so if you need help.
Thank you. And they're allowed to be quiet, so I certainly appreciate that, but I want the people who are here to know that you may be quiet. And Morgan, I might take you up on that, but I'm quite rattled. I think I'm holding it together quite well.
You are.
Thank you, but my telephone call with admin was not, right? So I kind of, I purged it. I got some therapy and got it out of my system so I can at least have a recorded lecture of the play for the students who aren't here. And then hopefully the students who who weren't so nice to me could approach me when we're back and let me know why I was targeted for living out my contractual agreements that hold me as an employee to the university, a job I love and would not want to be fired for. So we can certainly think about that too. As we move forward, feminism, queer subtext, addictions. Thank you, by the way, Morgan. So if I forget to say thank you, or if anyone notices I forget to follow up, I'm really staying very hyper-focused. It's kind of like, going to an audition where you almost get hit by a car as you go in, and then you're kind of like shaky a bit, but I seem to be organizing myself a bit.
No worries. Just thought I'd offer.
Thank you. I may. We'll see when we get there.
Perfect.
how do we understand the play in response to feminism? When we look at the climaxes, we're going to think about the treatment of women as social commentaries. The central conflicts of the play are internal and external. And Blanche has, as the pivotal major character, has two conflicts, one with herself and Mitch, and one with Stanley, which become part of scene 9 and scene 10. Scene 11 is the resolution. It resolves what the play has built up on. We have rising dramatic action right through the play with a denouement in scene 8 and various instances of dramatic irony happening throughout as well. If we look at the first scene, I'll be a little boring today. How does that sound, given the circumstances? And we're going to look at the inscription to A Streetcar Named Desire. But I came prepared today, my friends, right? I came prepared today. I need to see. So this is what happens when your eyes go on you. And so it was, I think I need to start over again. And so it was, I entered the broken world to trace the visionary company of love, its voice an instant in the wind. I know not whither hurled, but not for long to hold each desperate choice. From the broken tower by Hart Crane. This speaks rather acutely to Blanche and her own obstacles going through the world, and Stella does explain this. She's searching for something that she can't find, and this rises in dramatic action until Blanche explains this to Mitch in scene 9. Perhaps if I'm feeling relaxed enough, I can read from scene 9 with Morgan. We'll see if we get there, so thank you again. Scene 1 itself, and remember what we're used to in response to stage direction. We end up with an incredibly detailed set of stage directives. 1, 2, 3 full paragraphs and 1 small one. And we know exactly how the scene is going to be said. The exterior of a 2-story corner building on a street in New Orleans, which is named Elysian Fields and runs between the L and N tracks and the river. The section is poor, but unlike corresponding sections of other American cities, it has a Raffis charm. The houses are mostly white frame, weathered gray with rickety outside stairs and galleries and quainted ornamental gables. This building contains 2 flats, upstairs and down. Faded white stairs ascend to the entrances of both. So we know we're not in the fanciest area, but those of us who have lived south also know that the humidity eats away at paint. So we certainly have this notion of decay. The outside galleries and the outside staircases, of which we do see in Montreal, not best for our winters, but quite good for New Orleans. And it's the oncoming of evening in early May. The play will start in early May, and it's going to end in September. And there are 2 female characters, or 2 couples rather, that take place. Eunice and Steve, who are a mixed race couple, and Stanley and Stella, who live below, who come from 2 very different socioeconomic classes. This is explained to us. The words that are used so that we can understand them in response to their lexicon are simply antiquated, thankfully. The language of the slave trade is not incorporated with the N-bomb, for example. And please remember that African Americans use the word Negro in a very positive and liberating way. It changed its lexicon and became African American after that. Moreover, prior to the shifting to African American, the problematic term of colored was used. Why is colored problematic? Color doesn't sound like a troublesome term, but it was the term used to segregate and separate those who presented as white American from those who did not. So the word itself is reflective of Jim Crow, segregation, and has a nasty bite. So if we read these words when we're reading, we could simply replace colored with POC. And if we find the word Negro, we could replace it by black. And this way, when we read, we don't have offensive language. Please note that many African-American playwrights will use language that possibly, as Canadians, may make you uncomfortable. It's certainly not our space to correct them if the lived experience doesn't belong to us. That's how I understand it. As we enter into the play, we enter into a somewhat working class environment with everyday characters, right? Commonplace as they would have been understood in England. And from there, we're introduced to Blanche, who enters once the characters kind of exit. Stanley, Stella leave the stage, and Eunice, the upstairs neighbor, is there and meets Blanche. Blanche surfaces and her entrance is dramatic. In part, it could be understood as dramatic irony, but I'm going to suggest it's dramatic realism. And she stands very apart with these characters in dress and presentation. And the text itself tells us that she's looking for Stanley and Stella's house, but she's dressed as if she was going to a garden party, i.e. The Garden District, uptown, and not the French Quarter. Even the names used for the streetcars, of which Blanche takes, are important. And Blanche's first lines to Eunice, who asks her, "What's the matter, honey? Are you lost?" And Blanche replies, "They told me to take a streetcar named Desire and then transfer to one called Cemeteries and ride 6 blocks and get off at Elysian Fields." So the title of the play is mentioned almost right away. And Blanche moves from Cemeteries, which is now a bus in case you're curious, to Desire to arrive at where she is. And we do have a tango throughout the play of death, something that's dead or things that have passed, as Blanche's monologue will reveal in scene 1 or introduce, because this will happen throughout, and desire. A very important question would be, what does Blanche desire? What is she searching for as a character? What makes her incomplete? And when Stella shows up, her sister, her younger sister, they embrace with a very happy reunion. Why is Blanche there? She's a school teacher and it's still term. So we need to find out, okay, what is Blanche doing there? Why is she so nervous? Before Stella shows up, Blanche finds whiskey in the flat itself and knocks one back as she shakes. She's nervous and she's constantly taking a shot. The shot, as it's described, is very, very, very important because it will lead us up to the climax of scene 9. And Blanche reveals the truth, but only in part, much like the ghost of Hamlet. So not Hamlet himself, although there are similarities between Hamlet and Blanche as tragic characters suffering from wellness obstacles. Blanche speaks in poetry in some ways. She speaks in partial truths. She speaks her own particular language. And it appears that Blanche has lost Belle Reve, her family plantation, Williams's signal that the Old South is no more. So Blanche and Stella come from Laurel, Mississippi, just kind of north. Hopefully I got my geography right. Northeast? Yeah, northeast of Louisiana. And the plantation has been lost. I always ask my students to think, if you have a sibling who only works as a high school teacher and you know is suffering from forms of wellness issues, would you have this person take care of a very big estate? What would be the success rate? It would probably be quite weak. And Blanche does lose the estate, which in scene 2 fuels Stanley's anger. He doesn't understand her in response to her own wellness obstacles. We can't hold her accountable. She's suffering. People who suffer, we don't hold them accountable. But Stanley shows her no remorse, which is really exemplified in scene 8 in the denouement, where everything crashes through before the climaxes. When Blanche tries to explain herself, she does so through her symbolic realism, her poetic language. And she doesn't really explain to us exactly what happened, but instead she reveals this to us in different ways. She explains to Blanche, I took the blows in my face and my body, all those deaths, the long parade to the graveyard, father, mother, Margaret, that dreadful way, so big with it, it couldn't be put in a coffin, but it had to be burned like rubbish. You came home just in time for funerals, Stella, and funerals are pretty compared to deaths. Funerals are quiet, but deaths, not always. Sometimes their breathing is hoarse, and sometimes it rattles, and sometimes they even cry out, don't let me go. Even the old sometimes say, don't let me go, as if you were able to stop them. But funerals are quiet with pretty flowers and, oh, what gorgeous boxes they pack them away in. Unless you were there at the bed when they cried out, hold me, you'd never suspect there was even a struggle for breath and bleeding. You didn't dream, but I saw. Now you sit there telling me with your eyes that I let the place go? How in the hell do you think all that sickness and dying was paid for? Death is expensive, Miss Stella. Old cousin Jesse's right after Margaret was why the Grim Reaper had put up his tent on our doorstep, Stella. Belle Reve was his headquarters, honey. That's how it slipped through my fingers. Which of them left us a fortune? Which of them left us a cent of insurance even? And Blanche reveals to us her trauma in trying to keep afloat everything that's been lost. The play builds through scene 2, where Stanley pretty much interrogates Blanche, and he begins to raid her own personal belongings. He doesn't understand what he sees as he explains to Stella, as he flips through her trunk, tossing out all of her belongings. And think about your privacy when you come to class. How would you deal if the person sitting next to you went into your backpack and started grabbing everything and throwing things out? You wouldn't feel so good. And Stanley's character is foreshadowed here, not just in response to the volatility that exists, but within the symbolic assault of Blanche's property. Stella explains they're cheap, they're thrift shop finds, they're rhinestones, they're not anything particularly real. But Stanley doesn't really get that. And instead, he explains that the Louisiana Code means that as Stella's husband, he's responsible for half of what she had coming into the marriage, which would be half of her half of Belle Reve. Hopefully my law wasn't too bad. And he's angry. Scene 3 begins, and it's the poker night, and we end up with a huge description for us that draws attention to Van Gogh's. By the way, if you'd like to appear like an art historian or an artist, they pronounce his name in Dutch, so it's Van Gogh, so it kind of hurts here. Dutch has that sound back there, but Van Gogh's billiard parlor painting is in sight. Unlike the faded whites and pastel blues and pastel grays that we've seen in the play, we're all of a sudden given deep, dark colors. And Blanche and Stella come home early at this soiree where Stanley is playing cards with his guy friends and drinking. Blanche meets one of his friends, Mitch, who seemingly takes a shine to Blanche. And as they take a shine to one another and agree to meet, it's interrupted by Stanley's anger and frustration. And he loses his cool and aggressively assaults his wife. This is staged very differently in different versions. The very boyish Marlon Brando in the film version does punch Stella. Alec Baldwin, who's towers, although they do cast a very, I think it's Kim Hunter. No, it's not. I think I botched my actresses for Stella. He just kind of slaps her to kind of downplay because he's so much visually far more imposing. In the version you have, you'll be able to look at a sort of cross between the two. He's boyish like Marlon Brando, but there's something college boy-y about him as well. So that threat is kind of there. And Mitch comforts Blanche at the end. The next day, we're brought into daylight in scene 4, and Stella explains that she's fine with everything. Blanche is like, I got to get you out of here. I've got to get you out. And Stella's like, but I don't want to leave. Williams places forward a very avant-garde understanding of the problems with marriage, problems we are talking about now. Where did this come from in Williams's creative process? Williams's father was explosive, but his mother stayed the whole time. When Williams moved to the French Quarter in New Orleans, where he spent most of his life, the Tennessee Williams Repository is on Toulouse Street, the home he actually bought there with a lovely garden. I had the honor of speaking for the Tennessee Williams Society once, and it was just beautiful. I practiced my talk amidst orange trees in the courtyard. It's now a repository, so you can gain access to go through the records and the writing. Earlier on, when William lived closer down to Pirates Alley, which is off of Jackson Square, he actually had one of his lovers had a wicked temper. Williams didn't stay. He laughed it off and found it so over the top that he constructed Stanley sort of in response to his father and kind of some sort of maybe purging of growing up in a house like that. Williams was subject to emotional and probably psychological abuse by our definitions, but he really mirrored this off of this ex-lover he had, who he got rid of shortly thereafter. Stella lets us know that she loves Stanley and she has no desire to go anywhere. And she then begins to ask about Mitch and feels that she is at her wit's end, that Mitch could be her last chance. So we have a little bit of desperation happening there. What happens at the end of scene 4 is consequential in the rising action of the play. Stanley is listening to Blanche by the window, so he's kind of just below the house or the flat. And Blanche tells Stella exactly what she thinks of Stanley. So not only is he angry at her in response to what's happened with the loss of Belle Reeve, but he's going to hear what Blanche really thinks of him. Stella cues on Blanche and says, go on, say it all, Blanche. And imagine saying this about someone and being overheard. He acts like an animal, has an animal's habits, eats like one, moves like one, talks like one. There's even something subhuman, something not quite to the stage of humanity yet something ape-like about him, like one of those pictures I've seen in anthropological studies. Thousands and thousands of years have passed him right by, and there he is, Stanley Kowalski, survivor of the Stone Age, bearing the raw meat home from the kill in the jungle, and you here waiting for him. Maybe he'll strike you, or maybe he'll grunt and kiss you, that is, if kisses have been discovered yet. Night falls, and the other apes gather. There in front of the cave, all grunting like him and swilling and gnawing and hulking. His poker night, you call it. This party of apes, somebody growls, some creature snatches at something. The fight is on. God, we may be a long way from being made in God's image, but Stella, my sister, there's been some progress since then. Some things is art and poetry and music. Some kinds of new light have come into the world since then. In some kinds of people, some tenderer feelings had some little beginning that we have had make them grow and cling to and hold as our flag. In this dark march towards whatever it is we're approaching, don't hang back with the brutes. Stanley hesitates before entering according to the stage direction. And this obviously fuels Stanley's desire. He makes reference to this in scene 8. He'll hold it in for them. How does Blanche get further complicated? She's quite correct about Stanley, right? She calls it like it is. I don't think anyone reads or produces his play and sees Stanley as this victimized character of toxic masculinity. He is toxic masculinity and product of a system. And Williams critiques this system through Stanley. But Blanche is very, very lost. She's described as moth-like. And prior to this, when Stella asks her about herself, she says, or is it right after this? I think it's right after. No, it would have been before. Forgive me. She says, soft people are soft. They gotta shimmer and glow. They gotta wear the soft colors of butterfly wings, but it's not enough to be soft. Y'all done gotta be soft and attractive, and I don't know how much longer I can keep turning the trick. I'm fading now. And Stella ignores her. And she says, are you listening to me, Stella? And Stella's like, well, not when you're being morbid. Blanche has a deep-seated sadness. And in scene 5, we're able to see this sadness come even further. We've realized that there's moments in the staging where she kind of sinks back and tries to bring herself together, where she slaps the kind of furniture or herself to kind of grab a grip. In scene 1, she has 3 shots, though she says to Stanley, one's her limit. So she's not 100% honest. She at very least suffers from emotional turmoil. And moreover, she's drinking a lot, right? It's implied that she suffers rather acutely from alcohol abuse. And she explains to us, so sorry, I was right. It's right after in scene 5 when she explains to Stella that she's soft, she's fading, she's not solid enough for the world that she's in. And she asks her about Mitch, and Stella says, do you want him? And she says, yes. And she has a date with Mitch. She's going to come and pick her up and take her out. And Stella and Stanley leave to play bowling. And what's been presented in the play itself becomes very, very confusing. Depending on the staging, and the film version will kind of do a blur. There's the end of scene 5, which is quite troublesome. Morgan, are you still okay to read? How do you feel about that? You could say no. You could say
no. I'm good to read. I'm trying to find where we are. Is there a version on the Moodle, or should I just find one online?
I don't think there is, but we don't have to read. I'm at the end of scene 5. Do you, okay. If you Google a version, are you able to find it?
Yeah, I've got what version pulled up. I don't know if sometimes they're like not exactly the same because of like copyright and stuff like that.
Do you have 11 scenes in your version, or do you have it divided into acts?
I've got scenes, I believe.
Great.
I'm looking for, hold on, let me. Scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, scene 5. You said end of scene 5?
At the end of scene 5, Blanche is going to be left alone and she sinks into her chair with a drink, and I can read the stage direction. So it's a stage direction in square brackets in my edition. Yours might not be like that. And it says Blanche sinks faintly back in her chair.
I'm just scrolling. Sorry, everyone.
It's okay. If not, I can describe it. If you're not able to pull it, it's okay.
I've got it, I think. Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Are you able to be the young man?
Yes, with pleasure, but I will not be able to do the lovely accents that you're able to do.
Oh, no problem. You don't have
Everyone
to.
keep in mind, I'm creative writing. I'm not
It's
in
okay.
the theater department whatsoever.
Did anyone else want to read? Because we do have a stage director, but I could leave it out and I could read as well for that. So if anyone wants to read, you could put up your hand and let me know. But if you're feeling a little sensitive today, I completely understand. Going once? Going twice? Okay. So I'm going to read the stage direction and then we'll leave it out after that. Okay, Morgan? So I'll read just the first part of the stage direction so we can try and understand what's happening to Blanche. So I want us to think about what's going on in Blanche's mind. And then I want us to look at all of the empathetic realities I placed forward. Wellness issues, addiction issues, things we are sensitive to are going to get very complicated in this scene. And I know my students, my younger ones at the end of this scene get really, their view of Blanche shifts. And Williams does this for a reason. We'll talk about that after, but it will shift our understanding of the character at the halfway point of the play, probably before where the intermission would be. Blanche sinks faintly back in her chair with her drink. Eunice shrieks with laughter and runs down the steps. Steve bounds after her with goat-like screeches and chases her around the corner. Stanley and Stella twine arms as they follow, laughing. Dusk settles deeper. So those of you who are writing plays, think about the use, how amazing Williams is setting this for us. The music from the Four Deuces is slow and blue. Oh, me. Oh, me. Oh, me. Her eyes fall shut and the palm leaf fan drops from her fingers. She slaps her hand on the chair arm and a couple of times. There is a little glimmer of lighting about the building. A young man comes along the street and rings the bell. Come in. The young man appears through the portieres. She regards him with interest. Well, what can I do for you?
I'm collecting for the Evening Star.
I didn't know that the stars took up collections.
It's the paper.
I know, I was just joking feebly. Y'all have a drink?
No, ma'am. No, no, thank you. I can't drink on the job.
Oh, well, now let me see. Nope, I don't have a dime. I'm not the lady of the house. I'm a sister from Mississippi. One of those poor relations you've heard about.
That's all right. I'll drop by later.
He starts to go out. She approaches a little. Hey. He turns back shyly. She puts a cigarette in a long holder. Could y'all give me a light? She crosses towards him. They meet at the door between the two rooms.
Sure.
He takes out a lighter.
This doesn't always work.
Oh, it's temperamental. It flares. Thank you. He starts away again. Hey. He turns again, still more uncertainly. She goes close to him. What time is it?
15 of 7, ma'am.
So late. Don't you just love these long rainy afternoons in Nolans when an hour isn't just an hour, but a little piece of eternity dropped into your hands and who knows what to do with it? She touches his shoulder. You didn't get wet in the rain?
No, ma'am. I stepped inside.
In a drugstore and had a soda?
Uh-huh.
Chocolate?
No, ma'am. Cherry.
Cherry.
A cherry soda.
You make my mouth water. She touches his cheek lightly and smiles, then goes to the truck,
Well, I'd better be going.
stopping him. Young man. He turns, she takes a large gossamer scarf from the trunk and drapes it about her shoulders. In the ensuing pause, the blue piano is heard. It continues through the rest of his scene and the opening of the next. The young man clears his throat and looks yearningly at the door. Young man, young man. Has anyone ever told you that you look like a young prince out of the Arabian Nights? The young man laughs uncomfortably, and he stands like a bashful kid. Blanche speaks softly to him. Will you do, honey lamb? Come here. Come here. I want to kiss you just once, softly and sweetly on your mouth. Without waiting for him to accept, she crosses quickly to him and presses her lips to his. Now run along quickly. It would be nice to keep you, but I gotta be good. Gotta keep my hands off children. She stares at her a moment. She opens the door. She stares at him a moment. He stares at her a moment. She opens the door for him and blows a kiss at him as he goes down the steps with a dazed look. She stands a little dreamily after he has disappeared. Then Mitch appears around the corner with a bunch of roses. Look who's coming, my Rosen Cavalier. Bow to me first and present him. Oh, merci. She looks at him over them, coquettishly pressing them to her lips. He beams at her self-consciously. What did that just do to the play and the characterization of Blanche? It messes everything up. All of a sudden, we're starting to get foreshadowing of why Blanche might not be teaching anymore, right? You've all been expected to see this, so the foreshadowing is there. And as readers, viewers, we're put into a very uncomfortable position. So thank you, Morgan, for reading the uncomfortable scene. Staging. Vivian Lee in her version of Blanche is really petite. She has some speech particularities. She's really, really little. So the scene loses some impact because there's a softness to her. I don't know how she does it, but she does deliver these lines where the bite is softened. The directors of it was originally Kim Basinger and on Broadway, and then it was Jessica Lange in the film version that uses the Broadway cast. She's played off of Alec Baldwin for Stanley, just so you can get some visuals. Jessica Lange is the voice of Jessica Rabbit. She looks like Jessica Rabbit, so she's very voluptuous. There's a lot of sensuality to her in her presentation that is played up. So you have a lot more physical presence. But here, I'm going to complicate it more. The boy isn't 14 or 15. He's a college-stage student who's taller than she is. So there's this whole funny thing going on where you're like, what just happened? Because you end up from the sort of the sexual advancements coming from both sides. Here's the end product. Our end product is obvious. It raises the reality that Blanche suffers. What she'll explain in scene 6 to Mitch is that her traumatic break is she married very, very young. She married a boy who was homosexual and shoots himself in the mouth to liberate himself from the marriage because she has caught him with his male lover. Blanche is traumatized at this point, and her development thereby arrested. She sees younger men. Well, they're not men yet. She sees younger people and imagines them as Alan, the husband she lost. Does this excuse the behavior? No, we're not looking to excuse the behavior. We're looking at if we're going to treat her psychologically using all the modern psychology we have now, we have to understand where she's coming from. And to understand that, we then can figure out the treatment on how to hopefully work her through this. She's a fictional character, so we're in a little bit of a different boat. She has her date with Mitch, and the date itself remains problematic. She speaks French to him. All of you speak French, and if you go into scene 6, what she says to him is it's a little cachan, right? And she says it, revealing to us, and this is what we should be acting by this point. So just a couple of pages after that really difficult scene that we read a moment ago, that in the midst of being very bohemian, she says in French, "Do you want to sleep with me?" And we realize that there can be sexual compulsion tied into her psychological makeup as well. Williams's sister, in her suffering, had, I guess, what would be referred to today as a kinds of Tourette's, where she would kind of lose it and bark out sexualized phrases. And this is what her mother responded to for the lobotomy. We would have all kinds of treatments for people now, from behavioral treatments to medications to help them not do that. But Rose's own situation in her own life is camped here. Williams actually wants us to laugh at this sequence. Williams had an over-the-top sense of humor, and the serious underpinnings that are important for us to discuss, especially staging it, were a form of Williams's camp. This very queer aesthetic as a way to drag the text, much like Wilde's Women. Blanche can be read as a drag queen. If you look at Jessica Lange's version of Blanche, even Anne Margaret's, though she's toned down in the version I have for you, I wanted someone right in the middle of these extremes. She has this very sort of draggy quality to her that allows her to transgress the spaces of gender. And it's here that gender really becomes very, very complicated. Toxic masculinity is critiqued, the subservience of women in violent marriages, domestic violence is critiqued. And scene 7 reveals Stanley's revenge. So you have a character, and it's already mid-September. So by scene 7, we've moved June, July, 4 months. Imagine having a house guest living in your space for 4 months. Would you be able to handle it? And what happens here is Stanley seeks his revenge. Blanche's birthday is coming up, but Stanley has been doing all of his undercover work, and he's found out some information about Blanche that is that Stella doesn't want to believe. Part of losing Belle-Reve for Blanche included that she had to find extra work, right? If I said to you guys, okay, make an Excel sheet where you have to fund a large home, a chateau, a big house, you'd have a pretty big Excel sheet. And then if I said, I want you to take a school teacher's salary and fund it, you would all be like, well, we're bankrupt by month 6. I had to double mortgage of the house, and month 9, I had to sell it to the bank. Blanche has these same realities happening. And it's implied that she's taking work as an escort at a hotel that wouldn't interfere with their clients. In other words, where someone could go into the hotel with a sex worker and not be questioned by the hotel staff. So this is what the Hotel Flamingo is. Scene 8 is our denouement, right? So we've got our dramatic action is waiting to happen. And before that, Williams dips it down and nobody shows up to Blanche's birthday party. Kind of like this class, which has 66 students. And Blanche is left alone and her heart is broken. And Stanley rages against her. She's drunk and insults him. She's in the bathtub and comes out tinkling a highball as he's waiting. He needs to go to the bathroom. He's pounding on the door before the supposed party. And she's taken her time in the bathtub. So she's a house guest. She's in New Orleans, it's about 105 degrees Fahrenheit in September, just so you know. And she's taken a hot bath to calm her nerves. And finally, she swings open the door, drunk as a skunk, because she's been singing in the bath beforehand. And she says, nothing like a tall, cool drink and a long, hot bath to give a girl a brand new outlook on life. Stanley just has to go to the bathroom. He needs to relieve himself. He's not going to get Blanche's quirky, campy sense of humor. And Mitch never shows up. And a fight ensues. In other words, everything gets very heated. Blanche is going home. Stanley's bought her a ticket on a bus back to Laurel. But who saves the day? Stella goes into labor and the scene ends. Comments or questions? We're going to look at the climaxes and then the resolution. I need some more water, so you're going to give me a few minutes and I'll try and get you out of here as much as possible. I'm sorry, my friends, that I did have to disband the chat because I do know that it really does work as an effective way if people are feeling shy. I've never had a Zoom class so frozen before. So hopefully when we go over the assignment, you'll feel free enough to ask something. I think we're safe. And maybe the administrator I spoke to was able to get the message across to theater students that they're not allowed to interfere with the teaching. So I think we're going to be safe. So please give me just like a couple of minutes. Thank you. I am back. If you're ready for me. And I'm going to look at the rising action, sorry, the camera keeps right. The rising action that builds up to two actual climaxes. The first one where Blanche's conflict with Mitch, in other words, will she find love, comes to where it has to come to. And then the second climax, of which I never read in class, which is the presumed sexual assault sequence, where Stanley says we've had this date from the beginning, and Blanche's character passes out, and he carries her to a bed, and all critics read this as some kind of sexual assault. Every time I read it, I'm like, I see what Williams is doing, but Blanche is, she's been drinking all afternoon. So if this were a sociology class, I'd say, well, why don't you start drinking at 3 in the afternoon and let me know how you're doing by midnight. And she's drinking hard alcohol, so I don't think she's in any state to kind of do that. But Stanley's character is supposed to be that awful, that horrible, which is something as well, you know, you could think about, should you choose to write on this play. Scene 9 is the first part of the climax, and I'll try and read some of it with Morgan. Hopefully Morgan will still want to read with me a little bit. It's certainly easier than the previous scene. We'd read from the start of scene 9, and the directions say a while later that evening, Blanche is seated in a tense, hunched position in her bedroom chair. But this time we do have a shift in the music, my friends, and Blanche's wellness, her break from the present, her break from reality within the play is symbolized. So if we think about symbolic realism, is symbolized through the Varsuviana, a polka music that was presumably playing, or was playing according to her and the stage directions, on the night that Alan shot himself. So when Blanche loses it, when she has a really tough time, this music is played, revealing to us what we understand now in response to wellness issues as PTSD, right? Blanche is really suffering from a lot of trauma. At the end of the stage directions for scene 9, Mitch comes around the corner in his work clothes, blue denim shirt and pants. He's unshaven. He climbs the steps to the door and rings. Blanche has been drinking all day. Mitch missed the birthday party. He missed the date. How would you guys feel if how would you guys feel if someone missed a birthday date, someone you'd been dating for roughly 4 months, and then randomly shows up? This show up scene is going to show us the complicated gendered spaces of the time and Williams' critique of these gendered spaces. As well, Blanche will out her past and the complicated nature of her own psychology. Through this play, Williams asks us to think about how fragile human psychology is and how complicated and sensitive we become when we do go through something that shakes us up in some way. Are you ready, Morgan?
Yeah.
And we'll probably stop. I'll read some of it, and then we'll stop before the flower vendor shows up. So right before the end, maybe, and then I'll talk about that, and because I need more readers, which I don't have, and then we can move forward. Who is it, please?
Me, Mitch.
The polka tune stops. Mitch, just a minute. She rushes about frantically, hiding the bottle in her closet. So note, my friends, we do have uses of closets, of closeted spaces and things hidden. Crouching at the mirror and dabbing her face with cologne and powder, she's so excited that her breath is audible as she dashes about. At last, she rushes to the door in the kitchen and lets him in. Mitch, you know, I really shouldn't have let you in after the treatment I received from you this evening. So utterly uncavalier. But hello, beautiful. She offers him her lips. He ignores it and pushes past her into the flat. She looks fearfully after him as he stalks into the bedroom. Mama, what a cold shoulder and such uncouth apparel. Why, you haven't even shaved. The unforgivable insult to a lady. But I forgive you. I forgive you because it's such a relief to see you. You stop that polka music in my head. Oh, have you ever had anything caught in your head? No, of course you haven't. You dumb angel puss. You never have anything awful caught in your head. So she's talking to him, but she's having this conversation with herself. He stares at her while she follows him, while she talks. It is obvious that she's had a few drinks on the way, that he has had a few drinks on the way over.
Do we have to have that fan on?
No.
I don't like fans.
Then let's turn it off, honey. I'm not partial to him. She presses the switch and the fan nods slowly off. She clears her throat as Mitch plumps himself down on the bed and in the bedroom as the lights and lights a cigarette. So here we have dramatic irony. It's 105 degrees in New Orleans at this point in Fahrenheit/American. Has anyone been to New Orleans? No one's going to answer today. It's hot. How could you not be partial to fans before air conditioning? There's a dramatic irony there. The heat is rising. Williams is doing this to us through the play and through this stage direction. I don't know what there is to drink. I haven't investigated.
I don't want Stan's liquor.
It isn't Stan's. Everything here isn't Stan's. Something's on the premise are actually mine. How's your mama? Is your mother well?
Why?
Something's the matter tonight. But never mind. I won't cross-examine the witness. She touches her forehead vaguely. The polka tune starts up again. Pretend I don't notice anything different about you. Oh, whoa, that music again.
What music?
The Valse Vienna, the polka tune they were playing when Alan, wait. A distant revolver shot is heard. Blanche seems relieved. Oh, now then the shot. It always stops after that. So we've got two shots happening, right? The shot of alcohol she takes throughout the play, the shot that killed Alan, and the way it's used here. The polka music dies out again. Yes, now it's stopped.
Are you boxed out of your mind?
I'll go and see what I can find in the way of... She crosses into the closet, pretending to search for the bottle. Oh, by the way, excuse me for not being dressed. She's in a house coat at this point, my friends. But I've practically given up on you. Had you forgotten your invitation to supper?
I wasn't going to see you anymore.
Wait a minute, I can hear what you're saying, and you talk so little that when you do say something, I don't want to miss a single syllable of it. What I am looking around here for, what am I looking around here for? Yeah, oh yes, yep, liquor. Ooh, we've had so much excitement around here this evening that I am boxed out of my mind. She pretends suddenly to find a bottle. He draws his foot up on the bed and stares at her contemptuously. Here's something. Southern Comfort. What is that, I wonder?
If you don't know, it must belong to Stan.
Take your foot off the bed. It has a light cover on it. Of course, you boys don't notice things like that. I've done so much with the place since I've been here.
I bet you have.
You saw it before I came. Well, look at it now. This room is almost dainty. I want to keep it that way. I wonder if this stuff ought to be mixed with something. Sweet. So sweet. It's terribly, terribly sweet. Why, it's a liqueur. I believe, yes, that's what it is, a liqueur. Mitch grunts. I'm afraid you won't like it, but try it and maybe you will.
I told you already, I don't want none of his liquor, and I mean it. You ought to lay off his liquor. He says you've been lapping it up all summer like a wildcat.
Oh, what a fantastic statement. Fantastic of him to say it. Fantastic for you to repeat it. I don't want to descend to the level of such cheap accusations to answer them even.
Ah,
It's in your mind. I see something in your eyes.
it's dark in here.
I like it dark. The dark is comforting to me.
I don't think I ever seen you in the light. That's a fact.
Is it?
I've never seen you in the afternoon.
Whose fault is that?
You never want to go out in the afternoon.
Why, Mitch, you're at the plant in the afternoon.
Not Sunday afternoon. I've asked you to go out with me sometimes on Sundays, but you always make an excuse. You never want to go out till after 6, and then it's always some place that's not lighted much.
Pause. So no one's going to answer and it's okay, but what famous playwright has a play where light and dark is used repeatedly? In this play, light and dark are used to reveal the differences between truth and lies, and also reality and illusion. This kind of mimesis, in a way, is borrowed from Shakespeare, who uses light and dark in Othello to amplify the racialized places within the play. So we do have authors, writers, creators having conversations with one another through their works. Okay, so it's my turn now. There is some obscure meaning in this, but I failed to catch it.
What it means is I've never had a real good look at you, Blanche. Let's turn the light on here.
Light? What light? What for?
This one with the paper thing on it.
He tears the paper lantern off the light bulb. She shudders a frightened gasp. What did you do that for?
So that I can take a look at you good and plain.
Of course, you don't really mean to be insulting.
No, just realistic.
I don't want realism, I want magic. Yes, magic. I try to give people that. I misrepresent things to them. I don't tell truth. I tell what ought to be truth. And if that is sinful, then let me be damned for it. Don't turn on the light. Mitch crosses to the switch. He turns the light on and stares at her. She cries out and covers her face. He turns the light off again. Pause. So we've got our rising drama here. We have in part a little bit of dramatic irony as the light shedding the truth on the situation should solve a problem, but it actually doesn't, right? Blanche is too far gone and her obstacles are far too complicated for just a little light to shine on the situation and fix it. Go ahead.
I don't mind you being older than what I thought. But all the rest of it, Christ, that pitch about your ideals being so old-fashioned and all the malarkey that you dished out all summer. Oh, I knew you weren't 16 anymore, but I was a fool enough to believe you was straight.
Who told you I wasn't straight? My loving brother-in-law, and you believed him?
I called him a liar at first, and then I checked on the story. First, I asked our supply man who travels through lore, and then I talked directly over long distance to this merchant.
And who is this merchant?
Kai Favor.
Oh, the merchant Kai Faber of Laurel. I know the man. He whistled at me. I put him in his place, so now for revenge he makes up stories about me?
3 people, Kai Faber, Stanley, and Shaw, swore to them.
Rub-a-dub-dub. 3 men in a tub, and such a filthy tub.
Didn't you stay at a hotel called Flamingo?
Flamingo, no. Tarantula was the name of it. I stayed at a hotel called the Tarantula Arms.
Tarantula.
The stage direction before Mitch's line is stupidly. So Williams really makes sure we understand what's going on. Yes, a big spotter. That's why I brought my victims. She pours herself another drink. Yes, I had many intimacies with strangers after the death of Alan. Intimacies with strangers was all I seemed to be able to fill my empty heart with. I think it was panic. Just panic that drove me from one to another. hunting for some kind of protection here and there in the most unlikely of places, even at last in a 17-year-old boy, but somebody wrote the superintendent about it. This woman is morally unfit for her position. She throws back her head with compulsive sobbing laughter. Then she repeats this statement, gasps, and drinks. True, yes, I suppose unfit somehow anyway. So I came here. There was nowhere else I could go. I was played out. You know what played out is? My youth was suddenly gone up the water spout. And I met you. You said you needed somebody. Well, I needed somebody too. I thank God for you because you seemed to be gentle, a cleft in the rock of the world that I could hide in. But I guess I was asking, hoping too much. Kieferberg, Stanley, and Shaw tied an old tin can to the tail of a kite. There is a pause. Mitch stares at her dumbly.
You lied to me, Blanche.
Don't say I lied to you.
Lies, lies, inside and out, all lies.
Never inside. I didn't lie in my heart. A vendor comes around the corner. She's a blind Mexican woman in a dark shawl carrying a bunch, carrying bunches of gaudy tin flowers that are in display at funerals and other festive occasions. She's calling fairly audibly. Her figure is only faintly visible outside the building. Flores, flores para los muertos, flores, flores. And as Blanche and Mitch continue, this same pretty anonymous Mexican vendor keeps calling, flores, flores para los muertos. She keeps trying to say, do you need flowers for the dead? So we ask ourselves as an audience, what is dying here or what is dead? And Blanche goes on to explain everything that's dead, as she does start in scene 1. Her mother, her life, her job, everything lost, everything dead, until finally at the end of the scene, Blanche, maybe we could go back to that, Morgan, if you're okay. It'd be Blanche's line, what do you want? Do you have that line? And we could read the last few lines?
Yes, I do.
Okay. What do you want?
What I've been missing all summer.
Then marry me, Mitch.
I don't think I want to marry you anymore.
No?
You're not clean enough to bring in the house with my mother.
Go away then. He stares at her. Get out of here quick before I start screaming fire. Her throat is tightening with hysteria. Get out of here quick before I start screaming fire. He is still remaining. She suddenly rushes to the window with its pale blue square off of the soft summer light and cries wildly, fire, fire, fire. And Mitch finally leaves. Normally I do a more dramatic version of the fire, but my voice is kind of going from just talking the whole class. Blanche's truth is outed. We know that Alan is dead. We know this already. Her PTSD is confirmed. We're told that she definitely lives in, she worked as some kind of escort. Definitively, we don't know. That she definitely has sexual compulsion problems. She lets us know in between the Mexican vendor offering flowers for the dead, she has a flashback where she's wondering, remembering all these people, these men from the nearby military camp showing up and calling to her, and her mother being too deaf to hear them, and she sneaks out the window, so it's implied that she is intimate with them. There's all kinds of complications happening. And in scene 10, which is the hardest scene, and I never read it when we teach, Stanley and Blanche have it out. And the implied ending of this scene is there with menacing directives from the scene air, from the scene descriptors and the scenography of menace figures almost dancing. And it's implied that Stanley assaults her. Scene 11 is the resolution. What can the play do during this period of time? Williams critiques psychology. He critiques the treatment of people who are suffering. And Blanche is carted off to an asylum. She's removed. American society at this point in time did not have place for someone suffering. And it gets audiences from that point forward, all the way to now, to sit back and realize that people who suffer don't choose to suffer. And as a result, we need better social systems in effect to make sure they're supported. And Blanche functions almost as a fictive martyr of this, created through Williams's sister Rose, who had no life after the part of her brain was removed. Comments or questions? I guess not. Do you guys have any questions? Is anyone brave enough to ask me anything? You don't have to be. Okay, Morgan, thank you for reading. I'm gonna pull up your midterm reading exam if that's okay. And we'll have a look at it. And I will do a screen share as well. Sorry, for the foundational reading exam, forgive me, not the midterm one. It just came up a little late. So as a result, it's later than foundation. So I think our midterm one still will be kind of almost sort of midterm. So I've got the exam open now. And I'm going to screen share with you all. And we're going to go over the directives, and please feel free to ask me questions if you can. Doesn't seem to be allowing me to. How many participants can share at the same time? That said, give me one moment. Yeah, it seems to be correct, but I'm having a little trouble getting the screen to share. I'm going to resume the recording so that people who aren't here have access to this information. Make sure that when you organize your work and you save it, that you save your documents on double so I could read it. That would mean if by going into, I don't think this one will let me do it, but you'll need to go into paragraphing and set your spacing on double. You may save your document as a Word or a PDF. PDF is used if you're using Mac. If you save something as pages, I can't open it. So make sure that you save your work accordingly. You're going to have 4 paragraphs, one for each response. And make sure that each paragraph starts with a clear topic sentence and works with the text in question to create a tangible response. So as we're working with streetcar, think about what you might pull from the play to do that. If you're working with a screening of a play, which you can, this is a theater class, of course, you can do a mise en scène and you could describe the scene where it happens, but you still might want the script out. So especially if you're paying attention to wording, you'll be able to get there. Make sure each response starts with a topic. We'll animate this in a bit. And from there, you can develop your idea clearly. For example, so as I'm scrolling down, Morgan, are you able to see the questions now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So let's go over all the questions and make sure everything is okay. 1, I want the importance of being earnest to be understood as satire. We spoke a lot about social convention, so we need to understand it as a satire to see how it works. Think about the play in the ways that it challenges social convention. It's not an inscription of social convention. So if your topic sentence is, the importance of being earnest reveals Wilde's position on endorsing the social convention of the time, that's a misread. And you could choose one of these areas, for example. The importance of being earnest uses satire to critique social convention and sexuality. You might open that up. The character of Algernon seemingly has a mass sexuality, and through his mass sexuality challenges, or I'd use another word than challenges, questions the norms of the time. The consistent use of the word Bunbury raises an eyebrow, as it's not really a word, but could be understood as Algernon's coding of his own non-normative sexual practices. And then you would develop that. Does that make sense to everyone who's in the room? Can you guys thumbs up or thumbs down or just something so I know it makes sense to you? Maybe. Oh, great. Thanks, Danielle and Tasha. Okay, so you guys have that. Good. We'll work. Thanks, Thomas. We'll work through all of them. Thank you guys so much. Keep pulling up the wrong document. There we go. Weimar Berlin. So you have a lot of materials here. And another student did ask me this through Outlook. Think about Weimar Berlin as creating a space for sexual diversity. Look at the resource materials that historically understand Weimar Berlin. What was different about Weimar Berlin? Think about the Hirschfeld Institute that we talked about. Think about the speakeasy stage, the advent of the everyday stage, of the kind of cozy kind of informal club that created the subculture that was a response for gender and sexual diversity during this time. Think about the women who passed in more masculine clothing, from Radcliffe Hall to Marlene Dietrich. And think about the sexuality they embodied as well. With the documentary, there's a huge, what was understood as sapphic, which we spoke about as well, this kind of sapphic subculture, which was different than just straight up lesbianism or what we might understand as homosexuality / queer. It becomes a little more complicated than that. So this is your most historically based question, and you really want to look at the shifts in the spaces of the stage. 2 sets the foundation for 3. We're working from mainstream stages to the kinds of stages we might have access to. Question 3, how does cabaret represent the last moments of Weimar Berlin? So this is nice and open. And think about gender and sexual progressiveness in the early 20th century articulated through the play itself. The 4th question asks you to think about the social issues in Streetcar and Symbolic Realism, what we did today. How does Streetcar address these issues? Mental health, addiction, domestic violence, new working class, complicated sexuality, gender, misogyny. It goes on for days, right? The list goes on for forever. And Thomas, I'm coming back to you, and asks for a lot. Yes, Thomas, please.
Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So I just had a question because in the prompt it was saying that we have to use quotes or like for each paragraphs, or at least quote the text. But for question 2, is it referring to cabaret, or do we quote an article? Because it doesn't refer specifically to a text itself.
You'd be paraphrasing the resource material, and for cabaret 2, you can paraphrase as well. So if you
we don't have to directly quote.
No, as long as your paraphrase is clear, right? If the paraphrase isn't clear, then I could get lost. So make sure you paraphrase accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Very good question. So the foundational exam creates the foundation of the course. It asks you to think about social convention, subculture, sexuality, cabaret, and the burlesque, and social issues. Lots of them with Streetcar. Do we have any more comments or questions? Back to this. Anyone?
So just hi, how are you?
Hi, Pasha. I'm
So
okay. I'm hanging in there. It's
I know,
bit of a
sorry.
rough go, right?
Yes. So for when we're doing these, are you looking more for a sort of academic approach, or are you looking for really our own opinions on how we're synthesizing the information? Because some professors like you to be super academic, some people just want it to be more of like how you digested the information for how to.
I'm going to suggest, because this is your theater history class, that we do want you to be academic to a certain extent. But many of you are working in the arts, right? Many of you are creators and or artists. So you need to be able to have skills that shine through that as well. So having a more aesthetic approach to the material where the aesthetics are evaluated is also totally fine. In response to reader response, try and ground it, because all of these texts are, they're historical. So if you dehistoricize the text, you could lose track of the answer and end up going off topic, which I don't think you would.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure because I think the word aesthetic is what I was looking for, and I appreciate that because that helps me give a direction and how I want to respond. And just in case anybody else, because in another class we spent a lot of time talking about something we're going to see, but he doesn't want it to be academic, more of us how we see the art and how we feel. This more sensory,
Right.
but this is
right.
more of a balance. So thank you for that distinction.
I don't think the questions will allow the sensory response, but if you're really good at that, you could go for it as well, right? That if you're being trained, that you're able to look at a performance and have a sensory reaction. I think this would work well with cabaret, right? Especially if you're looking at the sensory reaction to Bob Fosse's choreography, or a sensory reaction to Alan Cummings' version of the MC, I think you could go into a very effective response from there.
Okay, that's what I was kind of thinking because it's one of the questions I'm really circling around. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. Had we been on campus today, I would have had more kind of workshop-y activities. But I mean, if the class kind of had a presence on Zoom, I'm presuming campus must be a little intense today. So it, the more of you could ask me questions here, the easier it's going to be for you. Anyone else with questions?